Juniper Ross never imagined that helping Mrs. Constance Tate paint flowers on a Sunday in October would change her life forever. The elegant lady had appeared in Washington Square Park with an easel and paints, but her hands trembled too much to hold the brush. "Dear, could you give me a hand?" she had asked with a shy smile. Juniper, who was returning from the poetry reading at Martha's house carrying her own sketches, didn't hesitate to help. 2 weeks later, when the most sought-after lawyer in Manhattan appeared at her door, looking for the artist who captured my mother's heart, she nearly fainted. "Hudson Tate," he introduced himself, extending his hand with calculated elegance. "My mother can't stop talking about the young woman who helped her with the painting." Juniper looked at the tall man in his impeccable suit and honey-colored eyes, trying to connect the dots. Mrs. Constance had never mentioned having a lawyer son. Actually, she had never mentioned anything beyond flowers and cake recipes. "Your mother is a sweetheart," she replied, still processing the information, "but I don't understand why you're here. She wants to hire you to give painting lessons, and He hesitated, running his hand through his dark hair. "I have 2 tickets for tonight's folk music festival at Madison Square Garden. Would you like to go?" Juniper's heart raced. A music festival, that event she dreamed of attending but could never afford tickets for. But something about his manner bothered her. Too proper, too privileged. "Do you happen to think that every architecture student is dying to go out with a suit-wearing lawyer?" she provoked, crossing her arms. Hudson laughed, and it was the first genuine thing she'd seen from him. "Actually, I was hoping you'd be different from the others. My mother said you have fire in your eyes and dangerous ideas in your head." Mrs. Constance said that. Juniper raised an eyebrow, among other things. "She also said you draw like someone who's saving the world, one line at a time." Miles, her orange cat, appeared at the window as if wanting to give his opinion. Juniper looked at the animal, then at Hudson, weighing her options. Music festival versus political principles. Art versus social class. Curiosity versus common sense. "What team do you root for?" she asked, testing him. "The Mets. Really? I thought you'd be a Yankees fan like every Upper East Side playboy." "Ah, so you've already catalogued me as an Upper East Side playboy?" He smiled sideways. "Interesting. And wrong, since I live in Midtown." Juniper couldn't contain a laugh. Beneath all that formal posture was something that intrigued her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her drawings scattered across the table with genuine curiosity, or how Miles had approached him without suspicion. "All right," she said finally, "but I'm driving. You have a car. I have a blue Vespa that purrs like a wounded lion. Problem? None. I've always wanted to ride a blue Vespa that purrs like a wounded lion." 3 hours later, they were in the audience at the Garden, surrounded by the effervescence of American folk music. Hudson had traded his suit for a dress shirt and blazer, but still looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Juniper wore her favorite midi skirt and an embroidered blouse she'd bought at a thrift store, her hair loose, swaying to the rhythm of the songs. "Do you know this song?" she asked when Bob Dylan took the stage. "The Times They Are A-Changin'," Bob Dylan, 1964. Impressive, a lawyer who knows music, and an architect who helps unknown ladies paint, were both full of surprises. But the real surprise came when the police raided the venue. "Raid!" someone shouted. "Everyone up! IDs ready!" Panic took over the audience. Juniper felt her blood freeze. She had some sketches in her bag that could be considered subversive by the authorities. Hudson noticed her desperation. "Give me your bag," he whispered urgently. "Why?" "Because I have legal immunity and you look like a communist college student. Give it to me, now." Juniper hesitated for a second, but logic spoke louder. She handed over the bag. Hudson hid it under his blazer, positioning himself in front of her as the officers approached. "IDs," ordered the officer. Hudson presented his bar association card with impressive calm. Juniper showed her student ID with trembling hands. The policeman looked at her suspiciously, then at Hudson. "Lawyer, huh? And her?" "My companion. We're just music appreciators, officer." "Columbia University?" The man read Juniper's address. You participate in student movements, miss? Juniper opened her mouth to respond, but Hudson was faster. She studies architecture, officer, builds houses, not revolution. The officer stared at them for a few more eternal seconds, then moved on. When they left the venue, Juniper was trembling. Why did you do that? She asked as soon as they reached the Vespa. Do what? Protect me? You don't even know me. Hudson looked at her, and for the first time that night, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. Maybe because I want to know you. 3 weeks had passed since the music festival, but Juniper couldn't get Hudson out of her head. Not for romantic reasons, at least that's what she told Martha, her roommate and biggest critic of heterosexual relationships. The guys from the elite, Juniper, Martha repeated while making coffee in the communal kitchen of their house in Greenwich Village. Elite doesn't mix with people like us, they just want to play at rebellion. It's not that, Juniper countered, mixing paint on a small canvas. She was painting flowers breaking through iron bars, inspired by the painting she'd helped Mrs. Constance make. As different, cultured, intelligent, and rich. Don't forget rich. Martha, you judge everyone who doesn't frequent the same circles we do, and you romanticize everyone who wears a well-cut suit. Tommy Fitzgerald, who had arrived with his guitar and an amused expression, interjected in the discussion. Ladies, ladies, as John Lennon would say, all you need is love, or as my grandmother would say, the heart doesn't choose social class, but the wallet chooses the future. Very philosophical, Tommy, Juniper laughed, but I'm not in love with him. A blatant lie. In the past 3 weeks, Hudson had appeared at her house 6 times, always with some excuse, bringing sheet music she'd mentioned liking, returning a borrowed book, asking if she wanted to visit a gallery in Soho. And he always stayed for hours talking about art, music, politics. The problem, continued Tommy, tuning his guitar, is that he's on the other side of the barricade, right? While you're here making protest art, he's there defending businessmen. He doesn't just defend businessmen, Juniper defended herself. His firm also takes civil rights cases. Sure, to clean their conscience, Martha huffed. The discussion was interrupted by knocks at the door. Juniper went to answer and found Hudson, but this time he was different, tense, worried. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. Of course. Juniper led him to the living room, where Martha and Tommy observed them with poorly disguised curiosity. Guys, this is Hudson, the bourgeois lawyer, Martha murmured, but extended her hand civilly. The communist feminist, Hudson responded in the same tone, but smiling. Pleasure, Tommy laughed. I like him, Juniper. He has a sense of humor. Hudson sat on the colorful fabric sofa they'd bought at an antique fair, clearly out of his element, but making an effort to seem comfortable. Juniper, do you know someone called Detective Ryan Murphy? Juniper's blood froze. She knew Ryan, yes, more than she'd like to. They dated the previous year before she discovered he was with the NYPD. The relationship had ended badly, with him making veiled threats about taking care of her safety. Why? She asked, trying to seem casual. He was at my office today, asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Martha approached. Protective instinct activated. If you attended demonstrations, if you had communist friends, he hesitated, if you had any romantic connection with me. Silence weighed in the room. Tommy stopped strumming the guitar. And what did you answer? Juniper asked, her voice a bit hoarse. That you were an architecture student I met by chance, that we had no involvement beyond conversations about art. So you lied, Martha observed. Technically, I didn't lie. Hudson looked at her. Because we really don't have any official involvement. The word official hung in the air like an unformulated question. Juniper felt her heart accelerate. Hudson, she said slowly, you need to understand something. I'm not just an architecture student who likes art. I make posters for the student movement. I attend readings where politics are discussed. I have ideas the government considers dangerous. I know. Do you really know? Because if you're here as some kind of spy... Juniper! He stood up, indignant. How can you think that? Because you appeared in my life out of nowhere, exactly when things are getting dangerous for people like me, because you have influence, money, power. Because it would be very easy for you to be a what? A trap? Hudson ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Look, I understand your distrust. I understand that to you I represent everything that's wrong in this country. But I came here today because I'm worried about you, not about the student who participates in student movements. About you, Juniper, the woman who helps unknown ladies paint pictures, who laughs at her own jokes, who has a cat named Miles and makes drawings that seem to have life of their own. Martha and Tommy exchanged glances. The speech had sounded too genuine to be acting. Ryan is dangerous, Juniper said finally. He was my boyfriend. Hudson stopped in the middle of the room. Your boyfriend? Ex-boyfriend. I only discovered he was a cop when we broke up. He didn't take the end of the relationship well. Define didn't take well. He shows up here sometimes, follows me, makes subtle threats about my safety. Jesus Christ, Juniper. Hudson sat heavily. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it's not your problem, she replied defensively. And because I didn't know if I could trust you. And now you know? Juniper looked at him, at the elegant, cultured man sitting on her worn sofa, clearly worried about her safety, clearly out of his comfort zone because of her. I think so. Hudson stood up and walked to her, stopping very close. Juniper could smell his cologne, discreet and sophisticated. Juniper, I need you to know something. My firm, my family. We represent powerful people, people who support this government. I don't agree with everything they do, but I also can't just what? Break with everything. It's not that easy. Nothing is easy, Hudson. The question is choosing which side you're on. He stared at her for a long moment. And if I choose your side, then you'll have to prove it. Before he could respond, violent knocks at the door made everyone jump. Police! Open the door! Juniper went pale. Martha ran to hide some books. Tommy grabbed his guitar, ready to pretend they were just playing music. But it was Hudson who headed to the door. Let me handle this, he said, adjusting his tie. And for the second time in a few weeks, Juniper found herself being protected by the man who should be her opposite. Mr. Tate, the sergeant leading the operation, almost choked when he saw Hudson open the door. We didn't know you were here. Well, I am, Hudson responded, with the coldness of someone who always had doors opening in front of him. And I'd like to know the reason for this invasion. It's not an invasion, sir. It's a routine operation. We received reports of subversive activities at this address. Juniper felt the ground disappear under her feet. Subversive activities. The expression that sent people to jail, or worse. Martha squeezed her hand discreetly. Subversive activities? Hudson raised an eyebrow. Sergeant, I work with international arbitration. I know this country's laws well. What type of subversive activity supposedly would be happening in a house where 4 students share rent? Clandestine meetings, production of communist propaganda material, conspiracies against national security. Interesting! Hudson entered the house, forcing the sergeant to follow him. And where is the evidence of these activities? The officer looked around the simple room. Worn sofa, improvised bookshelf with boards and bricks, guitar leaning against the wall, painting canvases scattered on the floor. Nothing that seemed particularly threatening. The reports. Reports can be made by ill-intentioned neighbors, vindictive ex-boyfriends, or people who confuse student meetings with Marxist conspiracy. Hudson interrupted, and Juniper noticed he'd mentioned vindictive ex-boyfriends while looking directly at her. Sir, with all due respect, you can't interfere with a military operation. I'm not interfering. I'm observing. And as a lawyer, I'd like to see the search and seizure warrant. Silence. The sergeant exchanged glances with the other officers. We don't have a warrant, sir. As I said, it's a routine operation. Routine operation without a warrant in civilians' homes? Hudson took out a small notebook and began writing. Full names and ranks of everyone involved, please. Sir, that's not necessary. It is necessary. Home invasion without a warrant is a crime, even during a state of emergency. And I have a professional obligation to report irregularities. Juniper watched the scene, fascinated and terrified. Hudson had transformed into the most intimidating version of himself, cold, calculating, using all the privileges of his social class to protect her. It was exactly the kind of thing she should hate, but at that moment it was saving her. Furthermore, he continued, still writing, I'd like to know who made the report. For subsequent civil investigation purposes. I can't reveal the source. Of course you can. Actually, you must. False accusations are also a crime. The sergeant was clearly uncomfortable. He didn't expect to encounter resistance, much less from someone with more political influence than him. Look, sir, maybe there's been a misunderstanding. Mixed up information. You know how it is. I know how it is. Hudson put away the notebook. Mixed up information can ruin lives. Fortunately, this time there was no major damage. The officers retreated with tails between their legs, leaving a heavy silence in the house. Juniper felt her legs shaking. Martha still held her hand. Tommy looked at Hudson with an expression that mixed admiration and confusion. How did you know they didn't have a warrant? Juniper asked when she managed to find her voice. Because if they had one, they would have shown it immediately. Intimidation only works on people who don't know their own rights. And you know everyone's rights? No, but I know mine. And I know that in this country, unfortunately, my rights extend to whoever is with me. Martha let go of Juniper's hand and stood up. Thank you, she said simply. I know you don't like me, but thank you. I didn't say I don't like you, Hudson replied. I said you're a feminist and communist. Which, by the way, isn't necessarily a criticism. Are you a feminist and communist, counselor? Tommy provoked. Impragmatic. I believe women should have the same rights as men because it's logically absurd to think otherwise. And I believe income distribution in this country is obscene because it's mathematically unsustainable. But you vote Republican, Martha suspected. I don't vote Republican. I don't vote Democrat. I don't vote because I consider the available options equally inadequate to solve the country's real problems. So you're apolitical, Juniper concluded. No, I'm politically disillusioned. Tommy clapped. Man, you talk like a character from a European film. Are you always this pompous? Only when I'm nervous, Hudson admitted, and for the first time since the police arrived, he smiled. Nervous about what? Juniper asked, though she suspected the answer. Because I almost saw you get arrested. Because I discovered you have a psychotic ex-boyfriend cop. Because I realized that liking you might be more complicated than I imagined. Liking me? She repeated, feigning surprise. Don't pretend it's news, Juniper. You know I've liked you since that first night at the festival. And you know I like you too. The question is liking enough? Hudson approached her, stopping very close once again. I don't know. But I'd like to find out. Even knowing that I really do make posters for the student movement. Even knowing that I have communist friends. Even knowing that in the view of people like your family, I am exactly the type of person who should be arrested. Especially because of that. Why? Because you make me question things I've never questioned. Because you make me want to be a better person than I am. Because, he hesitated, because when I'm with you, I feel like maybe there's still hope for this country. Juniper stared at him, looking for signs of falseness in his face, but she only saw sincerity and fear and something that looked dangerously like love. Hudson, she said slowly, if you stay with me, you'll have to choose between your family and me, between your privileges and your convictions, between safety and courage. And if I choose you, then you'll discover what it's like to live on this side of the barricade. He leaned in and kissed her. A soft, almost hesitant kiss, like someone asking permission. When they pulled apart, Juniper knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. It's decided then, Martha announced from the kitchen. We're all going to become political criminals for love. Seriously, Martha, Tommy laughed. You were already a political criminal before love showed up. That's true, she admitted, but now, at least it'll be fun. Hudson looked at Juniper, then at her friends, then at the simple house where he clearly didn't belong, but where maybe he could learn to belong. Are you sure you want to include me in your revolution? It's not our revolution, Juniper corrected. It's our life. And yes, I'm sure. But at the window a shadow moved. Someone was watching them, and Juniper had the terrible certainty that the real battle hadn't even begun yet. The month that followed was a roller coaster of secret meetings and disturbing discoveries. Hudson and Juniper saw each other 3 times a week, Tuesdays at his apartment, Thursdays at her house, Sundays in public places where they could pretend they'd met by chance. It was a dangerous game that both knew couldn't last forever. "My father is getting suspicious," Hudson said on a rainy Thursday while leafing through Juniper's drawings scattered across the living room table. "Yesterday he asked why I've been leaving the house so much." "And what did you tell him?" Juniper asked, concentrating on a new illustration, a flower growing in the middle of a cobblestone street. "That I have a girlfriend." "Technically, do you have a girlfriend?" she provoked, without looking up. "Technically, I have a woman. I'm completely lost over who refuses to give me an official title. Official titles are dangerous in times like these. Juniper," he put down the drawings and approached, "we need to talk." Something in his tone made her stop drawing. Hudson was serious, more serious than she'd ever seen him. "About what?" "About my firm. About my family. About things I discovered that—" He ran his hand through his hair. "That changed everything for me." Juniper got up and went to the sofa, pulling him to sit beside her. "Tell me, remember I said we represent powerful people? Businessmen? International investors? That type of people?" "I remember. Well, last week I was reviewing some old contracts from before I took over my part of the partnership. Contracts my father signed in the last 3 years. And I discovered we have clients who finance repression, Juniper. Companies that pay informants, that fund equipment for prisons, that give money for intelligence operations." Juniper's blood froze. "Intelligence operations like the one that almost arrested us here?" "Exactly like that one." Juniper got up from the sofa and began pacing around the room, processing the information. "So you're telling me your family profits from the persecution of people like me? I'm telling you my family profits from a system I'm beginning to understand is rotten to the core. And what do you intend to do with this information?" "I don't know," he admitted. "My father built this firm from nothing. My mother dedicated her entire life to keeping our family together. My sister just got married and depends financially on the family business. And me." Juniper stopped in front of him. "Where do I fit in this equation? You're at the center of everything. You're the reason I can no longer pretend I don't see what's happening." Before Juniper could respond, urgent knocks at the door interrupted them. This time it wasn't police. It was Tommy, and he was beside himself. "Juniper!" he shouted as soon as she opened the door. "Little Ricky disappeared." "What do you mean, disappeared?" She held her friend by the shoulders. "His mother called me. He left yesterday morning for school and didn't come back. The principal said he didn't even show up for classes." Hudson approached. "Have you already looked in the places he usually frequents?" "Already. Friends' houses, basketball court, library, nothing." Tommy was visibly scared. "Juniper, there's one more thing. Yesterday there was a raid at his school. They took 3 boys who were distributing flyers." "What kind of flyers?" Hudson asked, though he already knew the answer. "Protests against censorship, drawings of a flower breaking through bars, drawings like the ones you make." Juniper felt the world spin. Her drawings. Little Ricky had taken her drawings and turned them into flyers. Her 16-year-old brother was missing because of her. "I need to go home," she said, grabbing her bag. "I'm going with you." Hudson stood up. "No, you can't show up at my family's house right now. It would be too suspicious. Juniper, your brother might be arrested, or worse. And that's exactly why you can't get officially involved. Not yet." Hudson held her by the arm. "Let me make some calls. I have contacts in the police department. I can find out if he's arrested somewhere official." "Would you do that?" "Juniper, he's your brother. Of course he'd do that." She kissed him quickly and left with Tommy. During the entire trip to her mother's house in Queens, she couldn't stop thinking, what if little Ricky had been caught because of her? What if her drawings had put her family in danger? What if Hudson discovered that dating a subversive meant everyone around her was at risk? Mrs. Elizabeth opened the door with her face swollen from crying. She was a small, strong woman, a public school teacher for 20 years, but at that moment she seemed fragile as crystal. "My daughter," she hugged Juniper, "I don't know what to do anymore. Mom, tell me everything that happened since yesterday." They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Juniper had done homework for years, while Mrs. Elizabeth related the facts. Little Ricky had left early, saying he needed to deliver a project. He didn't come back for lunch, which was strange. He didn't come back at night, which was impossible. "Did he take anything besides his books?" Juniper asked. "He took a folder with some papers, said it was material for a history project." Juniper and Tommy exchanged glances. It wasn't a history project. It was her drawings, which little Ricky had turned into flyers without her knowing. "Mom, I need to tell you something." Juniper took a deep breath. "I think I know why little Ricky disappeared." During the next hour, she explained everything. The drawings, the student movement, Ryan's threats, Hudson. Mrs. Elizabeth listened in silence, her face getting more tense with each revelation. "My daughter," she said finally, "you put this boy in danger." "I know, Mom, and I'm going to get him out of this." "How? You're a 23-year-old student with no money or influence. How are you going to face the police?" Before Juniper could answer, the phone rang. Mrs. Elizabeth ran to answer, hopeful it might be little Ricky, but from her expression it wasn't. "It's for you," she said, extending the phone. "A man says he's a lawyer. Hudson." Juniper took the phone with her heart racing. "Hello? Juniper, I got some information. Little Ricky isn't in official prisons. Is that good or bad?" "I don't know. It could mean he managed to escape or that he's somewhere unofficial." "Unofficial places like?" "Interrogation houses, clandestine barracks, places where they take people they want to question without protocol." Juniper felt the ground disappear under her feet. "Hudson, I need your help. You have it, all the help I can give. Even if it means compromising yourself, even if it puts you against your own family, silence on the other end of the line, then..." "Juniper, I love you, and I love your family too, even without knowing them well. I'll do everything within my power." It was the first time he'd said, "I love you." In other circumstances, she would have been euphoric. But at that moment, she could only think about little Ricky. "What can you do?" "I can use my contacts to find out where he is. I can pressure for him to be transferred to an official prison if he's detained. I can..." He hesitated. "I can use information I have about my own clients to make trades." "What kind of information?" "Information that could compromise powerful people, people who don't want to see their name associated with repression." "Hudson, that's too dangerous." "More dangerous than leaving a 16-year-old boy in the hands of torturers?" Juniper closed her eyes. He was right. "All right. Do whatever's necessary. I'll start now. But Juniper, you need to leave the house. If they caught little Ricky because of the flyers, you're the next target. I can't leave my mother alone. Your mother is safe. You're not. Come to my apartment." "Hudson, it's not a request, Juniper, it's fact. If you're arrested, I can't help either you or little Ricky." She knew he was right, but it was hard to admit. "All right, but only until we find my brother." 3 hours later, Juniper was in Hudson's apartment in Midtown, looking out the window at the dark city while he made call after call. It was the first time she'd entered his apartment. Until then, they'd always met at her house or in neutral places. The apartment was exactly as she'd imagined, elegant, masculine, full of books and jazz records, very different from the messy house she shared with friends. There, every object had its place, every piece of furniture had been chosen with care. "I got something," Hudson announced, hanging up the phone. "Little Ricky is alive." Juniper turned, relief and fear mixing in her chest. "Where?" "In a house in Brooklyn, a place the police use for unofficial interrogations." "Interrogations about what?" "About you, about your friends, about the flyers. And now? Now I'm going to get him." "How?" "With this." He showed a folder full of documents. "Contracts that prove some of the most respected companies in New York finance illegal operations, including the operation that arrested your brother." Juniper looked at the papers. They were the ruin of Hudson's family, and also Little Ricky's salvation. Are you sure about this? I am. But you need to understand something. After tonight, there's no going back. My father will disown me. My sister will hate me. My mother will be devastated. He'll have to start from zero. And you're willing to do that? Hudson approached her, holding her hands. For you, for your family, for a country where 16-year-old boys don't disappear for distributing drawings? Yes, I'm willing. And if we don't succeed, if it's not enough, then at least we tried, and sometimes trying is already a form of winning. Juniper kissed him, a desperate kiss, full of fear and gratitude and love. When they separated, she knew that, regardless of what happened that night, their lives would never be the same. Let's go get my brother. Monday's dawn was the longest of Juniper's life. She stayed in Hudson's apartment, waiting for news, while he went out to do what he called delicate negotiations. She couldn't sleep even 1 minute. She stayed on the balcony, looking at the city lights, imagining where little Ricky was, if he was hurt, if he was scared. At 6 in the morning, the key turned in the lock. Hudson entered, exhausted, but he wasn't alone. Behind him came little Ricky, thin, dirty, with a black eye, but alive. "Sis!" Juniper ran to hug her brother, who collapsed, crying in her arms. "Juniper, I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I took your drawings without permission. I just wanted to help. I just wanted more people to see how you draw freedom." "It's okay," she whispered, stroking her brother's hair. "It's okay now." But it wasn't okay. Hudson had paid a high price for little Ricky's freedom, and she could see it on his face. "What happened?" she asked when little Ricky fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted. "I made a trade. The documents that compromise my clients for his release. And it worked. It worked. But now they know that I know, and they know you're important to me. What does that mean? It means from now on, we're officially enemies of the system. You, me, your family, all of us." Juniper felt the weight of responsibility. Because of her, Hudson had burned all bridges with his previous life. Because of her, he had become a target. "Hudson, you didn't have to do this. I did. For the first time in my life, I had to choose between what's convenient and what's right, and I chose right. And your family? My family already made it clear they don't approve of my new friendships. Yesterday, when I got home after getting little Ricky, my father was waiting for me. He said I had crossed an unacceptable line, that using confidential information from the firm to help subversives was betrayal. And what did you answer? That if defending innocent boys is betrayal, then I'm proud to be a traitor. Did he throw you out of the house? He gave me a choice. Either I cut relations with you and went back to behaving like a Tate, or I left the family forever. And you chose. I chose you. I chose freedom. I chose to live according to my convictions instead of living according to conveniences." Juniper approached him, touching his face with affection. "Don't you regret it? Saving your brother? Never. Discovering him capable of courage? Never. Falling in love with a woman who made me become the person I should always have been? Never. And now? What do we do now? Now we start over. I'm going to open a new firm, specialized in civil rights. I'm going to defend people like you, like little Ricky, like everyone who's persecuted for thinking differently. With what money? With very little money," he laughed. "It'll be difficult at first. I'll probably have to sell the car, maybe even the apartment. And it'll help. I'll work with illustration, with design. I can make posters, logos, visual identity for the firm. Protest posters too? Protest posters especially." They laughed, and for the first time in days, Juniper felt hope. But hope didn't last long. On the following Wednesday, while Hudson was in a meeting with a new client, a journalist who had been censored, Juniper received a visit at home. Claire Tate, Hudson's sister, was at the door, elegant and cold as a marble statue. "I need to talk to you," she said without preamble. "About what?" "About my brother, about what you did to him." Juniper let her in, but kept her guard up. Claire examined the house with evident disdain, as if she were inspecting contaminated land. "Do you know what you caused?" she began without beating around the bush. Hudson lost his inheritance, lost the firm, lost his family, all because of an affair with a communist. It wasn't an affair, and he made his own decisions. Decisions influenced by you. Hudson was always too sensitive, always let himself be carried away by lost causes, but he had never thrown away his entire life for a woman. He didn't throw his life away. He chose a different life, a life of poverty, of persecution, of risk. Claire approached, threatening. Do you think you did him a favor? I think he did himself a favor when he decided to live according to his convictions. Convictions he never had until he met you. Juniper was about to respond, but Claire interrupted her. I have a proposal. You disappear from his life, and I guarantee he can come back to the family. My father is willing to forgive everything, as long as Hudson proves it was just a phase. A phase? A premature midlife crisis? A rebellion outbreak? Call it whatever you want. The important thing is, it can be reversed. And if I don't accept your proposal, then I'll make sure you both pay the full price for your choices. Juniper felt a chill down her spine. What kind of price? The kind of price people like you have always paid in this country. Prison, torture, exile, disappearance. Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. My husband has contacts in the police department. It would be very easy to create evidence that you and Hudson are part of a terrorist cell. False evidence. Convincing evidence. After all, you've already been investigated. You already have a history of suspicious activities. It would just be a matter of connecting the dots more creatively. Juniper understood. She was facing a woman willing to destroy her own brother to maintain family appearances. Why would you do this? Hez your brother. Exactly because of that. Because he's my brother and I won't let him destroy his life for an infatuation. And if it's more than infatuation, if it's love, love passes. Family is forever. Claire left a card on the table and headed to the door. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the consequences will be out of my control. When Hudson returned home that night, Juniper told him everything. He listened in silence, his face getting darker with each detail. She's not bluffing, he said finally. Claire has always been ruthless when she wants something. And what do you think we should do? Run. Run where? I don't know yet. Maybe to another state, maybe to another country. I know lawyers in California who could help us. I have a cousin in London who works with political refugees. Hudson, we can't run forever. It wouldn't be forever. It would be until things calm down. And when will that happen? She held his hands. When do you think this country will stop persecuting people like us? He didn't answer, because they both knew there was no answer. Maybe, Juniper began, hesitant. Maybe it's better if I accept Claire's proposal. No. The answer was immediate and firm. Don't even think about it. Hudson, if I leave your life, you can go back to your family. You can rebuild your career. You can have security. And can live knowing I betrayed everything I came to believe in. Can live knowing I abandoned the woman I love because it was convenient. He stood up, agitated. Juniper, you don't understand. There's no going back. Even if you disappeared from my life, I could never go back to being who I was before. You transformed me. You awakened me. There's no way to go back to sleep after you wake up. But your safety, my safety isn't worth anything if I can't live with dignity. That night they slept embraced, knowing it might be the last time. The next day, they would need to make a decision that would forever change the course of their lives. Run or resist, hide or fight, separate or face together whatever came their way. But when dawn came, the decision had already been made for them. Violent knocks at the door woke them up. It was Ryan, accompanied by half a dozen officers. Hudson Tate and Juniper Ross, he announced with a cruel smile. You're under arrest for subversive activities against national security. And this time, there was no influential lawyer to protect them. Just the love of two young people against the brute force of a system that didn't forgive those who dared to dream of freedom. Epilogue. 3 years later, Folk Music Festival of 1971, Juniper adjusted her navy blue dress, the same one she'd worn the first time she went out with Hudson, and looked in the mirror of the improvised dressing room. 3 years had passed since that terrible dawn when they were arrested. 3 years of forced separation, exile, painful new beginnings, and finally reunion. Outside, she could hear the crowd singing along with Joan Baez. The Folk Music Festival had become a symbol of cultural resistance, a space where artists and audience gathered to celebrate American music in still difficult times. Nervous, Martha appeared at the door, smiling. She was more mature, more confident, but with the same sharp humor as always. "A little," Juniper admitted. "It's been 3 months since he returned from London. We're still getting used to being together again." "And how's it going?" "Different. We're different people now. More mature, more scarred, but also stronger." "And the book?" Martha was referring to the illustration book Juniper had published abroad during Hudson's exile. Flowers Behind Bars had won a prize in France and was being translated into several languages. It came out last week here in America. First edition, sold out in 2 days. Who would have thought the girl who helped ladies paint flowers would become an internationally recognized artist? Juniper laughed. The story of how she met Mrs. Constance, who really was Hudson's mother and not an unknown lady, had become legend among friends. The former partner of the oldest law firm in New York, who had distanced herself from business when she discovered the shady contracts with the regime, and who had manipulated their meeting because she believed her son needed someone to awaken him to reality. "Does Mrs. Constance still paint?" Martha asked. "She does. And she keeps saying she was the best matchmaker in New York." A gentle knock on the door interrupted them. It was Hudson, elegant as always, but now with some expression lines that weren't there 3 years before. Exile had been hard for him too. "Can I steal my girlfriend for a few minutes?" he asked Martha. "Girlfriend?" Martha raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were getting married." "We are," Juniper and Hudson answered together, then laughed at the coincidence. "When?" Martha insisted. "Next month," Hudson replied. "Small ceremony, just family and close friends." "And the new firm?" "Working well. I have 3 partners now, all specialists in human rights. We're defending political prisoners, families of the disappeared, censored artists. And making money? Enough to live with dignity." He smiled. "I discovered I don't need as much as I thought." Martha left them alone. Hudson guided Juniper to a balcony that overlooked the festival audience. Thousands of people sang along with the artists in an act of resistance disguised as celebration. "Remember the first time we came to a festival together?" he asked. "How could I forget? You saved me from being arrested, and you saved me from staying blind." "Hudson—" "No, let me talk," he interrupted, taking her hands. "I wanted to tell you that these 3 years, as difficult as they were, made me sure of one thing. No matter what happens, no matter what obstacles appear, no matter what difficult choices we have to make, I will always choose you. I will always choose us. Even if it means starting over again? Especially if it means starting over again. Because starting over with you is always an adventure worth taking." From the stage came the melody of "The Times They Are A-Changin' by Bob Dylan, the same song they'd heard on their first date, whose prophetic lyrics about social transformation seemed more relevant than ever in that moment of cultural and political awakening. "Want to dance?" Hudson extended his hand. "But here? Why not? We've danced in stranger places." It was true. They danced in his apartment to the sound of late-night jazz. They danced in her house to the sound of Tommy's guitar. They danced at a clandestine party in Paris during exile. They danced in prison when they managed a few minutes alone, without any music, just to the rhythm of their own hearts. While they danced slowly, Juniper saw something that made her smile. In the audience, a young woman held a poster where one of the drawings from her book was reproduced, a flower breaking through iron bars. The symbol that had been born from their love had become a symbol of resistance for an entire generation. "Look," she pointed to the poster. Hudson followed her gaze and smiled too. "Our flower broke through the bars, and now it's growing everywhere. Like our love, like our hope." The music ended, but they continued dancing in silence. Two survivors who had chosen love instead of fear, courage instead of convenience, freedom instead of security. Two young people who had discovered that sometimes the greatest possible revolution is simply refusing to let the world transform them into worse people than they were born to be. And there, on that balcony, under the stars of a night that promised better days, Juniper and Hudson danced toward the future. A future where flowers could grow freely, where art and love would be forms of resistance, where two brave hearts could face any storm as long as they were together. Because, after all, they discovered that true love is the one that avoids difficulties, but the one that faces them hand in hand, transforming each obstacle into more proof that some feelings are stronger than any regime, more lasting than any dictatorship, more powerful than any attempt to silence the human voice. And when the last chord of the festival echoed through the New York night, Juniper and Hudson knew their story was just beginning. Because sometimes the best love stories are those born in difficult times and flourish despite everything, proving that not even the darkest periods of history can prevent two brave hearts from finding the light.